Welcome into 5 Wide Fantasy. Today we're getting into start, sit, wide receivers, heading into week 6 of the fantasy football season. I'll be going through each and every game, giving you a preview of what to expect in these matchups in the passing game, what to do with your wide receivers. I'll have decisions on every single player that is starting on every single team from our games on Sunday into our Monday Nighter Cowboys-Chargers, which should be very exciting. Today's video brought to you by the STUNT. If you guys haven't checked out the STUNT, it's an all-sports social media app. It brings some of the favorite aspects of your favorite social media apps, puts it in one place, makes it all about sports. We're on there posting exclusive content if you follow OwnersBox. And then as well, I'm live there 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern time on the STUNT every single Friday, giving you guys personalized fantasy football advice, who to start, who to sit, giving you updates on these injuries, how to attack your lineup, and then, of course, any trade decisions or trade advice you're looking for, I can do that for you. Jump in the room, jump in the chat, or you can step up and chat with me right on there. Again, 4 to 5 Eastern on the STUNT. I will include the link to sign up down below in the description, as well in the pinned comments. If you haven't joined us there, would love to hear from you guys. A lot of you guys watching this video haven't really had the chance to meet with you, talk with you, chat with you, other than some of you in the comments. Would love to join you if you join me on the STUNT. Again, Friday, 4 to 5 Eastern time. So come check that out there. Let's get into these matchups. First up, our game across the pond. I can't remember. Is this game in England? Is this game in Germany? Regardless, a pretty solid game in the morning yet again here on Sunday. We've got Ravens, Titans. So defensively for both of these teams, there's a Titans team. Both these teams actually are great against the run, so it makes it for teams that do need to go to the air a little bit more, but the Ravens have done a really good job in the pass game as well. Their coverage grade from PFF is, I think, the best in the league, 90.2, ninth in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, a top 6 team in passing EPA, really only missing the pass rush. And against the Titans, you don't need to have a great pass rush to generate pressure because the Titans' offensive line is a major problem. So definitely a tough matchup for the Titans in the passing game. And then when you have things on the Ravens side for their offense, the Titans are a team to exploit in the passing game. A lot of teams have to go to a pretty high volume passing game against this team because they're so good against the run. In my opinion, them and the Eagles are the 2 best run defenses in the league. It shows here 25th in EPA against the pass, 21st in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. So definitely a good matchup for the Ravens in this one. So with that being the case, definitely Zay Flowers, a player you do want to start. The volume has been great for him. We haven't seen that really explosive game yet. This could be the one that it happens. And then Odell Beckham Jr. is back. He's been limited in practice with an ankle injury. Not something I'm worried about in terms of his status for this week. And I think this is a week where they'll really need to lean on their passing game. And Odell could definitely benefit from that. So if you do have him, I do think he's a solid start here because this is a matchup that there are very few as good as this one that make me feel great about Odell Beckham Jr., and this would be one of them. Rashad Bateman, all these guys really dealing with drops last week, but Bateman in particular, routes were very low, had more, Nelson Aguilar ran more routes. I believe they had even one of the, did Likely run more routes? He ran very few routes, so definitely not someone to consider starting right now. Pretty much a drop, honestly, at this point. On the Titans side, I'm sitting everybody here because the Ravens defense is just that good. Both of these teams are pretty slow paced, so there's not going to be a lot of plays in this game as it is. And the Titans don't change their offensive scheme and their tendencies for specific opponents. They're still going to run the ball a ton. And this is a really good Ravens secondary right now. Kyle Hamilton is playing at a freaky level. They're getting a little bit more healthy. So Hopkins hasn't been all that reliable at all this season, but in this particular matchup, I'm going to be sitting him. Next, we go to Commanders at the Falcons. This is a Falcons team that defensively has leveled up both against the run and the pass. Right now, they're 6th in fantasy points against wide receivers this season, but they do lack a bit of a pass rush this season. Their coverage isn't fantastic, 14th in EPA against the pass. I do think their run defense is better than their pass defense, so this could be a little bit more of the volume for the Commanders, especially taking advantage of the lack of pass rush, because the Commanders' biggest struggle is their offensive line, and they've got some great players in the receiving game if they can get the ball out quick enough. So I do like the Commanders' passing offense in this one. On the flip side, the Commanders, a team that have been had in the passing game, have really struggled. We obviously saw the Bears have a big game last week with DJ Moore. They're now 31st in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers on the season, 26th in passing EPA. So for your Falcons receivers, there's really only a couple pass catchers here to look at. They're definitely good options this week. So with that in mind, Drake London's definitely a start for me. I know the volume isn't incredibly high, but I do think he'll produce here in this matchup because the Commanders are a pretty decent run defense. I mean, Bijan Robinson is fantastic in his own right, so it doesn't really matter who the defense is. They're going to run the ball quite a bit, but London should be able to produce here when he does get his opportunities against this Commanders pass defense. On the opposite side with the Commanders, Terry McLaurin is really the only guy I can trust right now. Curtis Samuel could maybe elevate himself into a trustworthy player, but Jahan Dotson is definitely not that. So McLaurin in a matchup where I think the passing volume should be pretty decent here. I definitely like against this Falcons defense. 49ers, Browns, two excellent defenses this season, both against the run and the pass. The Browns are the number one defensive fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, have an excellent pass rush, a 90 grade there. I think they only trail the 49ers, the number one defense in pass EPA. So a very tough matchup here for the 49ers, but also one where if this matchup is difficult, it could lead to more neutral, maybe not a neutral game script, but if they're putting up a lower amount of points, we could see them throw the ball a little bit more than they have the last few weeks when they've been just crushing teams. And then the flip side with the Browns, 49ers, defense is going to give them some trouble. Fifth in EPA against the pass, 11th in fantasy points allowed, and one of the best coverage grades in the league. You cannot generate a lot of explosive plays against this 49ers team. Basically, nobody been able to do it. So pretty tough sledding here for the Browns. On top of that, we don't really know what the deal is going to be at quarterback. It looks like it's probably going to be PJ Walker and not Deshaun Watson. I'm expecting that to be the case, and with that being the case, all of their wide receivers are absolute must-sits. You cannot be starting any of these guys with PJ Walker at quarterback in such a difficult matchup. On the other side, I know this is a really good Browns defense, but they're also really good against the run. So we could see the pass game still plenty involved here because this is kind of a pick-your-poison thing against this Browns defense that's really good. I am still confident playing both Debo and Ayuk in Debo's ability to create yards after the catch, which will be necessary here because it'll be tougher to push the ball downfield. And then Ayuk has a great red zone option as well. So I think both these guys you can still start, even though on paper this looks like a really tough matchup. Saints at the Texans. Texans offense here is into another difficult matchup. The Saints don't look quite as tough when it comes to fantasy points to wide receivers, 14th, but 4th in EPA against the pass, one of the better coverage grades in the league as well. So this should be a game here for the Texans where points will definitely be at a premium. The Texans defense, really bad against the run, but very good against the pass. I mean, their coverage grade this season has been really, really good. The EPA doesn't tell me they're an elite unit, but they're 3rd in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. So pretty tough to score points against this Texans team in the passing game. A lot of teams just looking to go and run the football against them to be more efficient. So what that means for me with the Saints, I do see Derek Carr off the injury report, no injury designation. That is a really good sign and potentially a chance here for the passing game to hit its stride a little bit more and make Chris Olave a guy that deep downfield can finally start hitting some more plays. He's definitely a start for me, but what I am going to shy away from is a Michael Thomas start this week. Again, the Texans have done a good job, have been a really solid coverage unit, and I do think the Saints will lean on their ground game here because they know of what the positive matchup that this provides. On the Texans side, Tank Dell, dealing with a concussion. I'm not too sure if he's going to play. He hasn't been practicing the first couple days of the week. I'm recording this video on Thursday. Collins is someone that I can still start in this matchup here because, again, throwing the football might be the better way for this Texans offense to move the ball. And we've seen C.J. Stroud, who's been terrific the last few weeks. So Collins, I'm still comfortable starting, even if Dell does play. But both Dell and Woods are dealing with injuries, so could really open up that opportunity for Collins here as the number one option. Moving to Panthers, Dolphins. These are two defenses, I would say more one. The Panthers have been really good against the pass. And again, much like the Texans have not been good defending the run this season, but 7th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers is really solid, almost just outside the top 10 in EPA. I think the Dolphins might not score as many points as they have been against some of their most recent opponents. Obviously, Denver, we saw the Giants. I think they score less than 30 in this game, and I think it's because the Panthers boast a really good pass defense, and Raheem losing Devon Achane will definitely hurt the rushing game and its explosiveness. But I do still think the Dolphins will be able to move the ball here enough to generate production from the receivers that we have. On the Panthers side, the Dolphins have been a team that are starting to improve against the pass after a bit of a tough start. Their pass rush has looked really good, which could be a problem here for the Panthers, who their pass protection has not been good. The Dolphins are a team, though, that with how good they've been playing and such a significant favorite here, there should be a lot of passing volume from the Panthers in this one like they've had most of the season. That means for me with the Panthers, Adam Thielen is going to be a start because of that volume. He's been the beneficiary of it for the last number of weeks, posting over 100 yards last week against the Lions. Definitely think that in PPR formats, he's definitely an absolute must-start guy. DJ Chark's been leading the team in routes run. He's more of that explosive play option. I don't know how many of those will be available to the Carolina in this one. And Jonathan Mingo getting on the field a bunch, definitely a good sign, but nothing consistent here to be willing to put out there for your fantasy teams or even pick up off the wire. As for the Dolphins, week in, week out, not much to talk about. we're going to start Tyreek Hill. We're going to start Jalen Waddle. And that third receiver option is far too risky, whether it's Cedric Wilson, Braxton Berrios, whoever it might be. But in this matchup, still comfortable playing both of those guys. Seahawks at the Bengals. This Seahawks defense is becoming pretty clear of what to target when you're looking at your fantasy assets, playing them. They've improved to be one of the best run defenses in the league this season and not a very good pass defense whatsoever. 29th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, 63.2 coverage grade. Their pass rush, we have it in green here, 77. Now they do come off a bye week, and then they also had the Giants. In the 3 weeks prior to the Giants meetup, they were not a good pass rush. And the Giants have been one of the worst pass protection, I would say, in the league this season. So I don't think that they're as good of a pass rush as the numbers indicate. That could be really helpful here to Joe Burrow with their passing game. Giving him a little bit more time in the pocket, give him some more clean pockets because, again, that calf injury, he's not too mobile right now. As for the Seahawks side, offensively, the Bengals have lost a lot of their depth in the secondary and honestly, a lot of their talent with Bates gone as well and Von Bell. But that makes them kind of a middle-of-the-road unit. Their coverage grade is really poor, 57.4 from PFF, but definitely right now not a unit to be too scared of when it comes to playing them in fantasy. Now, with that being said, on the Seahawks side, DK Metcalf has this rib injury. He hasn't been practicing, but that's been the case kind of in the middle of every week. Don't have a concern here as to whether or not he will play. Definitely feel like he will play, and if he does, when he does, he is a start. Now, for Tyler Lockett, he's had 7 deep passes, so passes of 20-plus air yards, and hasn't caught a single one. So positive regression will be coming for him. I'm just not so sure it'll be this week. I do like Lou Anarumo as a defensive play caller. He's done a good job in the past against some of the best quarterbacks in the league, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, of limiting those explosive downfield plays. So I'm not comfortable playing Lockett right now with the volume is being where it is, and Jackson Smith and Jigba is coming off the field too much. He's not being looked at. His average depth of target is far too low, so he's not someone that is reliable right now. He needs far more volume with the way he's being utilized. On the Bengals side, I don't expect T. Higgins to play with his rib injury. Maybe I'm wrong because he did practice in a limited fashion, I believe today and Wednesday. So I like Jamar Chase, obviously. If we don't see T. Higgins, I really like Tyler Boyd because, again, the Seahawks have been tough to run on, and they've had the most opponents have been throwing the ball over 41 times a game against them, the most in the league. So with that kind of volume, Boyd will be a solid start. And if Higgins does play, Boyd could still be in some of your deeper leagues a pretty decent start here, just because, again, the passing volume will probably be pretty high from this Bengals team. And there's not a lot to believe in terms of an Irv Smith in the tight end spot stealing those opportunities from Boyd. So definitely like him in either way this happens, but especially so if Higgins doesn't play. Colts at the Jaguars. We already have a rematch in a week from a week 1 meeting between these two teams. There's a little bit to go off of, but not to say this will run the exact same way it did in week 1. The Jaguars struggle against the pass. Both these teams kind of have this season, but the Jags were pretty good against the Bills, but they did give up a lot of fantasy points to both Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis. So their run defense is a lot better than their pass defense. So you should see the Colts with now with Gardner Minshew at quarterback, look to throw the ball a little bit here. And for the Colts, honestly, a pretty middling unit across the board. There's really nothing that I'm too worried about when I'm playing them, or do I say that they're like absolutely terrible at? 22nd in fantasy points allowed, 20th in EPA against the pass. So for the Jags here, a pretty neutral matchup for this offense. But the thing is, do we go with Christian Kirk? Because in week 1, he did have a really down week. He didn't run a lot of routes. Zay Jones was out there far more. Same with Calvin Ridley. Ridley had that big game. He's definitely one I want to play. But with the way that Kirk has gone so far and his target share kind of surpassing Ridley's, I can't sit him this week in this matchup. Zay Jones, I'm kind of doubting that he plays. I have him listed as a sit right now. Even if he does play, he did score a touchdown in this matchup in week 1, but this knee injury seems to be a problem for him. I risked it and played him last week. It did pay off because he did find the end zone, but he did leave the game again. So this week, where the matchup isn't quite as nice, I'm going to lean towards sitting him. On the Colts side of things, Josh Downs, his role, we talked about this in our Keep Trade Cut video. Or no, actually, this was in our TikTok on the 5 Wide TikTok channel. Josh Downs with Gardner Minshew at quarterback, his target rate is almost double. It's at like 24% compared to like 12.8%. So in this matchup where I think the Jags are much worse as a pass defense than run defense, I think Downs is a solid play because it seems like Minshew likes to get the ball to him. He's that slot target that he can get the ball to over the middle of the field and get to pretty quickly. Pittman is still one with some down weeks here. I'm still going to be starting in this matchup because, again, I think the pass volume should be pretty solid. Next, we have Vikings at the Bears. This is two teams in terms of passing defense that are really, really poor this season. Both of them haven't generated much of a pass rush, but the Vikings kind of use the blitz to be able to generate their pass rush, so this grade doesn't really indicate or utilize that. But the Bears have next to none. Going to give Kirk Cousins a lot of clean pockets, which should definitely help him in his first week without Justin Jefferson. Literally, Justin Jefferson has never missed a game in his career. The Bears coverage unit, not been good. Their EPA is 31st in the NFL. They're 20th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. Definitely comfortable with my Vikings players here. And then on the Bears side, the Vikings are a unit that still, even with their blitz packages, have been really poor against the pass. But Justin Fields hasn't been good against the blitz, so that is something to keep in mind as well. So with that in mind, I know Jordan Addison is nursing an ankle injury. A little bit concerning for me, but if he does play, you still got to start him. This is such a good matchup for him and now elevated to this top role. But with Addison kind of nursing that injury, I do think Osborne will be a good start because the Bears are not a bad run defense. So I do think the Vikings will still have some good passing volume in this game on the road. Osborne has been out there a ton. He's just not getting the targets because he's had so much competition. One less player in competition he can produce. In the final 5 weeks of last season, he was actually the wide receiver 7 in fantasy points per game. So can trust him here to be a pretty good floor. I don't know how high the ceiling will be this week, but the floor should be really solid. On the Bears side, though, I mentioned this, DJ Moore, or I mentioned this about the Vikings pass defense. That makes Moore a pretty solid start for you this week. I don't trust the secondary guys of a Darnell Mooney. Maybe you play Cole Kmet, but Mooney and EQ are definitely not guys I want to go to because, again, that concern about Fields and how he does against the blitz hasn't been very good this season so far. Patriots at the Raiders. Man, this Patriots offense is horrendous. Absolutely terrible. Pretty much a team you don't want to touch. But the Raiders are not a bad defense, or not a good defense. 29th in EPA against the pass. Everything else here, numbers-wise, is about middle of the road in terms of the rest of the league. 17th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. The Patriots, I respect their pass defense. I think it's still pretty solid even with the injuries. The pass rush isn't really there, though, which is a bit of a problem against this Raiders team that's Jimmy Garoppolo is pretty used to being under pressure a fair bit. So with the injuries, it's not a terrible matchup for the Raiders receivers. As far as things go for the Patriots, not going to be looking to start any of these guys. I think they lean more on their run game with how bad Mac Jones has been and how poor of a job they've done taking care of the football. I bet you they look to run the football to take care of the ball at a better rate. On the Raiders side, I think Adams will still play. I know he's nursing the injury. I'd be surprised if he does sit. If he does, that makes Jacoby Myers an even better start. But both of these guys right now in the target share that they've commanded in this offense and with how much they are struggling to run the football, they're struggling so much. Josh Jacobs, even in plus matchups, we saw last week against the Packers, they still can't run it. The run blocking has been terrible. So these guys are still good in most matchups because of how much they got to throw the ball to kind of be able to be efficient offensively. Lions at the Bucs. The Lions have been a team that have really improved defensively across the board. Both these teams actually right now top 10 in EPA against the pass. The Lions are really good against the run. I think they're a better unit against the run. 19th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers this season. The pass rush hasn't been quite good. Like Hutchinson's been able to generate a lot of havoc, but the rest of the unit hasn't. That could really help Baker Mayfield. A little bit more time to throw could definitely help this offense. On the Bucs side, I think they're a solid run defense. Their pass defense is kind of middle of the road. Okay. Nothing to be too worried about. 8th in EPA against the pass is not bad, but more middle of the road in fantasy points allowed. Not much of a pass rush. So still a solid matchup for the Lions in their passing game. Now we've added competition here with Jameson Williams coming out from suspension. I do think Amon-Ra St. Brown will be back. I know a lot of you guys are making jokes about the fact that I assumed Amon-Ra St. Brown was going to be playing. I saw him missing practice, but then he really got downgraded. So again, recording this on Thursday night, I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to play. If he does, he's a weekly start for you, and that pushes Josh Reynolds, Jameson Williams down. If Amon-Ra does not play, Josh Reynolds would be a guy I would be comfortable starting, but Jameson Williams, still wait and see there. On the Bucs side, I don't think Mike Evans plays. He hasn't been practicing, but Godwin's in a good matchup here. The Lions like to play a lot of zone coverage, and Godwin has been an absolute monster against it, not just this season, but in his career. But these secondary, tertiary options, Trey Palmer, Devin Tompkins, are not ones I'm willing to take a risk on, because the Lions have been pretty good defensively. Even if I do say that they're better against the run, they're still pretty solid against the pass too. Cardinals at the Rams. A Cardinals team that's going to be missing James Conner for an extended period, and I do think that'll affect their run-pass split here. I'm not sure Amari DeMarcado or Keontae Ingram will be able to run the ball too effectively for them, so that might mean a little bit more Josh Dobbs and leaning on his arm in this one. The Rams have been great in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. I'm kind of trying to piece together why. The Bengals were down a little bit. They did play the Niners, and they were pretty solid. Who did they have last week? The Colts. Anthony Richardson went down because their numbers in terms of everywhere else isn't very good, but the fantasy points allowed is really good. So a little bit weird here, but I can't really put my finger on why. I'm not too scared of their unit for the Cardinals, but something to keep in mind. The Rams, though, offensively shouldn't have a problem moving the ball through the air. The Cardinals have struggled quite a bit against the pass, 23rd in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, 28th in EPA, not much of a pass rush. So all systems go here for this Rams offense. So that means Cooper Kupp is definitely a player you want to start. Puka Nacua, there's a few matchups that I would be sitting him in. Honestly, these guys are capable of both producing, especially with how inefficient the rushing game has been for this team. So I definitely like both of these guys. Should still see close to double-digit targets for both of them. They're hogging this offense. So it's good to see that Nacua can still be productive even with Cooper Kupp in the fold. As for the Cardinals, I do think Michael Wilson and Marquise Brown are solid starts here because, again, I think with James Conner out, the passing game will be even more utilized. This team will probably be trailing in this game. They're 7-point underdogs against the Rams here. So I feel pretty damn comfortable with both Brown and Wilson. I know Brown is banged up. There's a chance he might not play. If he doesn't play, Wilson I feel even better about, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm elevating Rondale Moore to a start. I just feel a bit better about Wilson and, of course, Zach Ertz as well. Eagles at the Jets. We've got a Jets defense that's the second best in fantasy points allowed. 2 wide receivers on the season, one of the best coverage grades in the league as well. Got an Eagles team that'll probably be pretty welcome to running the football with how good this Jets team has been against the pass. Hopefully if they get DJ Reed back, and then they were also missing one other, I'm blanking on his name, they'll be even better defensively against the pass. The Eagles, though, the best run defense in the league right now. So teams are throwing the ball quite a bit, 30th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers on the season. But again, the pass rush is so good, and we saw Elijah Vera Tucker out for the season. Gives me a lot of concern for this Jets passing offense under Zach Wilson. So that is something to keep in mind too. Even with that being the case, Garrett Wilson is still a guy I do want to start. He does dominate the target share in this offense. Again, running the football will be super inefficient for this team with Breece Hall. His rushing yards are listed at like 50, 53 and a half or so. This Eagles defense gets a ton of respect. They haven't even given up, on average, they're giving up less than 50 rushing yards a game. So Wilson should be able to survive on volume here. If you're in a standard league, that'd be another discussion. But half PPR, full PPR, I'm still comfortable with them. On the Eagles side, I talked about this in our shorts video. Devontae Smith is a must-sit this week. Again, I think the Eagles dominate this game and don't need their passing game a whole hell of a lot, especially with how difficult it is to pass the ball against the Jets. Still would play A.J. Brown, but Devontae Smith right now will be a sit because his target share is just not good enough right now. It's less than 20%. The Giants. I got to keep watching the fucking Giants play. And it looks like they might be missing half their team. But the Bills at home, massive favorites in this game. The Giants have struggled across the board defensively, 26th in fantasy points allowed, 27th in EPA against the pass. They dial up the blitz a fair bit. If Josh Allen can handle that and this offensive line can handle that, they shouldn't have much problems moving the ball. The Bills have been a really, really solid defense this year. They're dealing with a ton of injuries, which really sucks. I just don't think this is the team that takes advantage of those injuries, especially if Daniel Jones might not be playing, especially if they're missing even more on their offensive line. Who knows what the status of Saquon Barkley will be. So, the Bills defense might be too much for this Giants team the way they are right now. So with that being the case, definitely going to be sitting all of my Giants wide receivers. Wanda Robinson, limited in practice, missing practice a little bit, with still nursing that knee injury from the ACL tear from last year. I know he also left with concussion, so his status will be up in the air. He's the guy I feel like. He's the guy that I am most excited about, but that doesn't mean I want to start him right now, especially with the question marks at quarterback too heading into this week. For the Bills, Gabe Davis is now becoming a pretty consistent start. He's definitely having a much improved year to last year, just more consistent in the targets. We're those explosive plays are there, but we're not overly reliant on it. And then Stephon Diggs, the volume's always great for him. So both these guys are guys I feel comfortable starting against this Giants defense. Monday Night Football. There's a good primetime game. Cowboys at the Chargers. Very excited for this one. We'll be streaming live on Twitch for this game on Monday night. So OwnersBox Sports on Twitch if you guys do want to come hang out. Be sweating our bets on there. The Chargers are my favorite team, so this is a big one. Cowboys, defense, still good. I know the Niners put it on them last week, but this is still going to be a really good unit. I think their pass defense has taken a step back without Trevon Diggs, but Stephon Gilmore is still there. They still got an excellent pass rush. The Chargers don't have a lot of difference makers in the receiving game right now with Mike Williams out for the year. Still feel confident in them. They're still an elite unit, top 4 in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, second in EPA against the pass. The Chargers, though, dead last in fantasy points allowed to the receiver position. This coverage unit still hasn't figured it out. We'll see with 2 weeks of prep if they have an answer here for Brandon Staley's group. But, man, he's been around for a couple of years now. This is a very similar group in terms of their secondary and their pass defense to last year, and they still don't have things figured out. So it's a very prime opportunity for Dak Prescott in the passing game to get right. And with that being the case, I'm not really there on Brandon Cooks. He seems to be running a lot of sprints out there. Michael Gallup has done a better job commanding targets in this offense. I think he's a more dynamic threat for this team. I like him this week as a start against this Chargers defense. Same, of course, goes for CeeDee Lamb. Keenan Allen will be a start week in and week out. He's pretty much on that like Stephon Diggs, Tyreek Hill, kind of tier for me because he's just going to dominate target share. And now he's making some more plays downfield compared to the last couple of seasons. In this tough matchup, though, Josh Palmer, Quentin Johnston, those are guys I'm looking more to sit. Palmer is more on the cusp of a discussion where I could see you wanting to start him. But the Cowboys defense, they've obviously been terrible in a couple of games here, but for the most part been really solid. And again, Palmer's not an overly talented option. So I do think with Austin Eckler back, this eats into those opportunities for those guys, and the rushing game kind of gets a little bit more volume, which it has not since Eckler's been gone. Okay, that's every single matchup heading into week 6 of the fantasy football season, helping you set your lineups at the wide receiver position this week. If I missed anything, or if you have some more questions, want some more context on some players or things we discussed, definitely drop that down below in the comments. But if you guys have questions about what wide receiver to start, what wide receiver to sit, I'm not going to be answering those in the comment section. I'll be answering those I will answer those in the comment section. Sorry, because we're posting this on Friday night. But I answer those questions directly in our Start Sit video, or our Start Sit segment on the Stunt. I'm live 4 to 5 Eastern time on Fridays on the Stunt. Again, when we get this out on Friday, I don't have quite as much time to answer all your questions. I will try to get to as many as I can. But if you want personalized advice for your fantasy team, join me on the Stunt. Download the app. The link will be down below in the description and in the pinned comments. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you on the next one.